Frustration, much like any emotion, is a natural part of life. However, it often feels like an overwhelming tide, pulling us deeper into negativity. We must understand that frustration doesn't originate from external circumstances, but from within us. It is a reflection of our expectations, attachments, and how we react to life's challenges. The first step toward overcoming frustration is to realize that it is not a permanent state. Like any storm, it will pass, but only if we allow ourselves to ride through it with awareness. In life, frustration often arises when we perceive a gap between what we expect and what we are experiencing. The moment we stop living in harmony with the present and start demanding something different from it, frustration creeps in. Our desire for control and our rigid attachment to how things should be make us suffer. To come out of frustration, you need to learn to see the bigger picture. Life isn't here to serve your personal plans or desires, it is a vast flow of energy that is beyond any individual's control. Acceptance in this context does not mean resignation, rather it means an understanding that what happens is not always within our grasp, but how we respond is entirely in our hands. It's important to cultivate a space within yourself where you do not need the world to behave in a certain way for you to be at peace. This does not imply passivity, but rather an inner strength to maintain calm despite the unpredictability of life. Frustration is a powerful emotion, and often we mistakenly think that it is caused by external circumstances. We believe that the traffic jam, the missed opportunity, the unfulfilled expectation, or the actions of others are the triggers. However, frustration, like all emotions, is not something that originates in the world around us. It is born within us from our own thoughts, perceptions, and reactions. When we experience frustration, it is usually because we have an image or expectation in our mind of how things should be. This image is often rigid and disconnected from the present reality. For example, we might expect to complete a task within a certain time frame, but when things don't go as planned, frustration arises. This emotional response isn't really about the task or the delay, it is about our attachment to a specific outcome and our inability to reconcile reality with our expectations. In fact, frustration is not something that comes from the outside at all. It is the result of a clash between our internal world, our thoughts, desires and beliefs, and the external world. The world does not change to meet our preferences, and when we resist this reality, we create tension within ourselves. This tension manifests as frustration. By recognizing that frustration comes from within, we begin to see that it is not something happening to us. It is a product of our own inner landscape. Understanding this allows us to shift our focus. Instead of blaming the external world for causing our frustration, we can look inward and examine what it is within us that is causing this emotional response. Supenta, this understanding brings with it empowerment. If frustration is internal, then it is also within our ability to transform it. We do not need to wait for the world to change, nor do we need to control every situation. What we can control is how we respond, how we perceive the situation, and how we release our attachments to certain outcomes. Through this awareness, we can learn to diffuse frustration before it escalates into something more disruptive or rigid expectations, or like a set of blinders that we place on our minds, narrowing our vision and limiting our ability to see things as they truly are. We set these expectations because we want life to unfold in a particular way. We decide based on our past experiences, desires or societal pressures, how things should happen. The problem arises when life does not meet these expectations. In that moment, frustration is born and we find ourselves caught in a loop of resistance. These expectations often stem from a belief that we can control how things unfold. We impose a structure onto the natural flow of life, believing that we are entitled to a certain outcome or experience. When reality does not match the picture in our minds, the tension between what we expect and what is happening creates frustration. And this frustration, rather than motivating us to take productive action, often leaves us stuck, focused on what is wrong rather than on what is possible. What happens when we let go of rigid expectations? First, we open ourselves up to a broader experience. Life becomes less of a demand and more of an unfolding mystery. We allow ourselves to engage with the present moment rather than trying to force it into a preconceived mold. When we release the need for things to go exactly as we envisioned, we stop setting ourselves up for disappointment. Instead, we begin to flow with life, embracing the unexpected and finding the beauty in what emerges naturally, even if it doesn't align with our original plans. Letting go of rigid expectations also invites flexibility into our lives. When we are open to different possibilities, we are less likely to feel thwarted when things don't go our way. Instead of feeling trapped or powerless, we become more resourceful, learning how to adapt to new circumstances. We start to see obstacles as opportunities for growth and change rather than barriers that block our progress. Our thoughts shape the way we experience the world, and often it is not the external circumstances that cause frustration, but the internal narrative we create around them. Thoughts are the silent architects of our emotional state. They arise automatically and often without our conscious awareness, yet they have the power to influence how we feel and react. By observing our thoughts, we can gain greater control over how we respond to situations. Instead of being swept away by the currents of emotion, the first step in observing our thoughts is becoming aware of them. Most of the time, we are so caught up in the momentum of our thoughts that we don't even realize we are thinking. We are consumed by a continuous stream of mental chatter, judgments, assumptions and reactions. This constant mental activity often dictates our emotional responses. For example, when something doesn't go as planned, we may start thinking, "This is unfair," or "I can't believe this is happening to me." These thoughts feed into frustration, creating a cycle that becomes difficult to break. However, when we make an effort to observe our thoughts instead of simply reacting to them, we create a space between stimulus and response. We realize that we are not our thoughts. They are just mental events that arise and they do not have to control us. By stepping back and noticing these thoughts without attachment or judgment, we can prevent ourselves from getting lost in them. In moments of frustration, we can pause and observe the thoughts that are fueling it. Are we telling ourselves that something is wrong? Are we blaming ourselves or others? Are we attaching a particular meaning to the situation that might not be accurate? By noticing these thoughts, we can begin to question their validity. Do these thoughts help us, or do they perpetuate our frustration? Most often we find that our thoughts are exaggerated or based on assumptions that may not hold true. Through this process of observation, we learn to detach from our thoughts. We understand that thoughts are transient. They come and go like clouds in the sky. They don't define us, and we don't have to engage with every thought that arises. When we observe our thoughts with awareness, we are better able to see how they shape our emotional experience. This allows us to choose our responses more consciously, without being enslaved by automatic reactions. The act of observing our thoughts also gives us we may notice that certain types of thoughts, like expecting perfection or blaming others, tend to trigger frustration more frequently. By recognizing these patterns, we can begin to make shifts in our thinking, choosing more constructive and balanced thoughts. Over time, this practice of observing our thoughts creates space for clarity. Instead of being caught in the turbulence of our emotions, we become more grounded and centered, able to respond to situations with a sense of calm and equanimity. Rather than allowing frustration to control us, we take the power back by observing the thoughts that drive it and choosing whether to engage with them or let them pass. In the end, frustration is not something that is inherently negative or something we must constantly fight against. It is simply a signal, a reminder that our expectations, attachments and reactions need to be examined. When we become aware of our thoughts, loosen our grip on rigid expectations and recognize that frustration is not a force imposed by the outside world, but an internal experience, we can navigate life with greater ease. The key to coming out of frustration lies not in trying to control everything around us, but in shifting our inner state. When we align ourselves with the natural flow of life, when we release our attachments to specific outcomes and stop letting our thoughts drive our emotions, frustration loses its power over us. We become more present, more adaptable and more at peace with what is. So next time you feel frustration rising within you, take a moment to step back and observe. Let go of the need for things to be a certain way and allow yourself to simply experience the moment as it is. In this space of awareness and acceptance, you will find the freedom to transcend frustration and live with greater clarity and inner peace.